Every night, millions of people end their day the same way, a glowing screen in one hand, a late snack from a plastic wrapper in the other, something salty, something sweet, something quick enough to eat without thinking. And then they wonder why sleep feels shallow, why the body feels restless, why the mind keeps moving long after the room has gone dark. Modern life has made food faster than ever. But it has also made the evening meal strangely disconnected from the body's oldest rhythm, because for most of human history, dinner was not entertainment. It was not a reward after stress. It was not a late-night battle between cravings and exhaustion. It was a closing ritual, a way to tell the body, the labor is finished, the fire is low, the village is quiet, the night can begin. And long before nutrition labels, sleep trackers, or supplement powders, ancient people were already building evening meals around foods that were warm, simple, mineral-rich, fermented, fibrous, and close to the earth. They did not know the words magnesium, omega-3, polyphenols, probiotics, or blood sugar stability. But they knew what helped a tired body settle. We are going through 15 ancient evening foods and rituals from the biblical world, the ancient Near East, Egypt, Greece, and Rome, foods that modern science is beginning to look at with new respect. Stay with me until number 7, because there we meet one of the quietest but most powerful foods in the ancient home. And by the time we reach number 1, the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. The wisdom was never loud. It was served warm after sunset in clay bowls beside small fires, by people who understood that rest begins long before sleep. Before we begin, one important note. This video is for educational and documentary purposes only. It is not medical advice. No single food can replace professional care, medication, or a balanced lifestyle. If you have a medical condition, allergies, pregnancy, dietary restrictions, or concerns about fermented foods, raw honey, dairy, fish, or grains, always speak with a qualified health professional. Now, let us begin. Number 15. Warm barley soup. The meal that slowed the evening down. Before the ancient world went to sleep, it often ate something warm, not a heavy feast, not a sugary dessert, but a humble bowl of grain, water, herbs, and oil. In a small Israelite home, after the animals were brought in and the fields had gone dark, barley could be simmered slowly over a small fire. The steam would rise through the room. Children would grow quiet. The body, tired from the day, would receive something simple enough to understand. Barley was one of the great survival grains of the biblical world. It was less prestigious than wheat, but more reliable. It grew in poorer soil. It fed farmers, shepherds, soldiers, and travelers. In times when life depended on harvests, barley was not ordinary, it was dependable. Modern science gives us one reason why this grain mattered so deeply. Barley contains beta-glucan, a soluble fiber that forms a thick, gentle gel during digestion. This kind of fiber may help slow the absorption of carbohydrates and support a steadier release of energy. And in the evening, that matters, because the last meal of the day should not feel like a spark thrown into dry grass. It should feel like embers settling. A warm barley soup with olive oil, lentils, or herbs would not have been glamorous, but it may have helped the body move from labor into rest. The ancient table understood something modern life forgets. Sometimes the best evening food is not the richest one. It is the one that asks the body to slow down. And the next food takes that same idea even deeper, into the quiet world of fermented milk. Number 14. Fermented milk with honey. The ancient night drink in the biblical imagination, the good land was described as flowing with milk and honey. But the milk of the ancient world was not the cold, highly processed drink most people imagine today. In warm climates, milk did not remain fresh for long. It changed. It thickened. It soured gently. It became yogurt, Laban, curds, kefir-like drinks, and other living foods shaped by the bacteria in the vessel, the animal, the air, and the household. At night, a cup of fermented goat or sheep milk with a small spoon of honey would have felt like comfort. Tangy, soft, slightly sweet, alive. Modern research has become increasingly interested in fermented foods because they can influence the gut microbiome, the vast inner ecosystem connected to digestion, immunity, and metabolic health. But ancient families did not need a microscope to know that fermented milk was different from fresh milk. They could feel it. It was easier to store, easier to digest for some people, more stable in heat, and when taken slowly in the evening, it became less like a drink and more like a ritual. The honey mattered too. Not as a candy, not as a medicine replacing care, but as a small sweetness from the natural world, something gathered from flowers, fields, and patient bees. A cup like this was not designed to excite the body. It was designed to calm the table. And in a world without electric light, calm was not a luxury. It was survival. Number 13. Lentil stew, the bowl that fed the tired body. The story of Esau and the red stew is one of the most famous food scenes in the Hebrew Bible. A hungry man comes in from the field. He is exhausted. He sees a pot of red lentils. And in that moment, appetite becomes destiny. For centuries, the story has been told as a warning about impulse. And it is. But there is another layer hiding under the surface. Esau was not craving decoration. He was craving restoration. Lentils were one of the most practical foods in the ancient world. They cooked into a warm, thick stew. They provided plant-based protein, fiber, iron, folate, and minerals. They could be stored dry for long periods and revived with water and fire. For a body that had been walking, hunting, lifting, harvesting, or traveling all day, lentils made sense. They did not hit the body like refined sugar. They stayed, they held, they gave weight to the evening. Modern nutrition science often speaks about legumes with respect because they bring together protein, fiber, and slow-digesting carbohydrates in one food. But the ancient home already knew this combination by hunger. A pot of lentils at night was more than dinner. It was repair. It was the food of people who could not afford weakness the next morning. And perhaps that is why the story still feels so human. Because every person knows what it means to be tired enough to trade wisdom for comfort. The ancient question is not only what Esau ate, it is what hunger can make us forget. Number 12. Olives and flatbread. The traveler's supper. Imagine a traveler on a desert road after sundown. The sky is purple. The heat leaves the stones. The animals slow their breathing. There is no kitchen, no market, no table. Only a cloth bundle open beside a small fire. Inside, flatbread, olives, perhaps a little oil, perhaps a few herbs. This was the kind of food that moved across the ancient world. Olives were not just fruit. They were preserved energy, a way to carry the olive tree through winter, through journeys, through war, through trade. In the Mediterranean world, olives and olive oil became central not because they were fashionable, but because they were useful. They provided fat, flavor, and stability in a world where food spoiled easily. Modern science now recognizes extra virgin olive oil as one of the signature foods in Mediterranean-style eating patterns. It contains monounsaturated fats and polyphenols that are being studied for their relationship with heart-conscious diets and inflammation-related pathways. But around an ancient fire, nobody spoke that way. They simply tore bread, pressed olives between their fingers, shared oil from a small vessel, and ate slowly because darkness had already arrived. This meal teaches one of the quiet lessons of ancient eating. Food did not need to be complicated to be complete. Sometimes bread, oil, olives, and silence were enough. Number 11. Fish with bitter greens. The shoreline evening meal near the Sea of Galilee. The evening had its own sound. Nets pulled across wood, water against stone. Men speaking softly after hours under the sun. Fish laid over coals while herbs and bitter greens waited nearby. Fish was one of the most important foods in the biblical landscape, especially for communities close to water. Small fish could be grilled, dried, salted, carried, traded, and eaten with bread. They were simple food, but not nutritionally simple. Modern science pays special attention to fish because fatty fish can provide omega-3 fatty acids, including EPA and DHA. These fats play important roles in the body, especially in cell membranes and inflammatory signaling. The ancient people did not know this vocabulary, but they did know that fish restored tired bodies without the heaviness of large meat. Pair that fish with bitter greens, wild herbs, chicory-like leaves, mustard greens, or other sharp plants, and the meal becomes even more interesting. Bitter foods were common in ancient diets. They awakened the mouth. They supported the sense of digestion. They reminded the body that food came from fields, not factories. A small grilled fish with flatbread and bitter greens was not a luxury meal. It was a shoreline supper. quiet, mineral-rich, protein-rich, and deeply tied to place. And maybe that is why meals like this lasted for centuries. They belong to the land. Number 10. Chickpeas with garlic and olive oil. The strength of the common table. Long before hummus became a modern grocery store product, mashed chickpeas belonged to the ordinary kitchens of the ancient Near East. The ingredients were simple: chickpeas, garlic, olive oil, salt, perhaps lemon or vinegar when available, perhaps sesame paste in richer homes. The result was dense, filling, and practical. Chickpeas offered plant protein, fiber, minerals, and slow-burning carbohydrates. Garlic added sharpness and aroma. Olive oil softened everything into a paste that could be eaten with bread. This was not elegant food in the royal sense, it was working food. The kind of food that could sit in a bowl and feed whoever came home hungry. Modern nutrition researchers are interested in legumes, partly because their fiber and resistant starch can nourish gut bacteria, which may produce short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate. These compounds are studied for their role in gut barrier function and metabolic health. The ancient world did not say resistant starch. It said, eat, you have worked enough. That is the beauty of this kind of meal. It does not perform sophistication, it performs care. A bowl of chickpeas at night meant someone had thought ahead. Someone had soaked the beans. Someone had kept the fire. Someone had crushed the garlic. Someone had made strength spreadable. And in the next food, we find another ingredient that carried strength in a surprisingly small form. Number 9. Sesame paste with dates. The mineral-rich sweetness in ancient Mesopotamia, sesame was valuable. Its seeds were small, but its oil was precious. It could be pressed, stored, traded, and used in food, medicine, lamps, and ritual life. Across the wider ancient world, sesame became one of those quiet foods that rarely stands in the center of the story, yet appears everywhere when you know how to look. Ground sesame paste, what we now know as tahini, is rich, earthy, and slightly bitter. Pair it with dates, and the bitterness softens into something almost ceremonial. This is the kind of evening food that feels simple but carries density. Sesame provides minerals such as calcium, magnesium, zinc, and copper. It also contains lignans, plant compounds that modern researchers study for antioxidant activity. Dates bring natural sweetness, potassium, fiber, and a deep desert flavor. Together, they create something the ancient world loved: sweetness with weight. Not the quick sweetness of candy, not the empty sweetness of refined syrup, but sweetness attached to fiber, minerals, fat, and memory. A small plate of sesame paste and dates after the evening meal would not need to be large. Ancient foods often understood portion without needing to preach it. A little was enough, because real foods speak slowly. And if sesame was the quiet mineral of the ancient table, the next food was the fruit of patience itself. Number 8. Figs with walnuts. The orchard before sleep. A ripe fig does not shout, it softens. It bends on the branch. Its skin loosens. Its sweetness deepens in silence. In the biblical world, the fig tree was more than agriculture. It was a symbol of peace, settlement, and enoughness. To sit under one's vine and fig tree was to imagine a life no longer ruled by fear. That image matters, because figs were not only food. They were signs that the land had rested long enough to give. At night, fresh or dried figs with walnuts would have been a deeply satisfying food. Sweet, earthy, mineral-rich, and slow. Figs provide fiber, including soluble fibers that may support digestive regularity and feed beneficial gut bacteria. Walnuts bring plant-based fats, including alpha-linolenic acid, a plant omega-3 fatty acid, along with minerals and polyphenols. Together, they offer a pattern ancient people understood instinctively. Fruit alone can be sweet and quick. Nuts slow it down. Fiber meets fat. Sugar meets structure. This is the kind of pairing modern nutrition often rediscovers under new names. But the old world did not call it a strategy. It called it supper. A few figs, a handful of nuts, a quiet room, and the day folding itself away. And yet, even this gentle food is not the most surprising evening ritual. That comes next. Number 7. Warm herb infusion. The quiet medicine of the ancient home before pills, before capsules, before sleep supplements. There was hot water, leaves, seeds, roots, flowers, and thyme. In the ancient home, herbs were not decoration, they were part of daily life. Mint, dill, cumin, coriander, hyssop, fennel, anise, chamomile-like flowers in surrounding traditions. Some were eaten, some were burned, some were steeped, some were tied, taxed, traded, and stored. At night, an herbal infusion was not just a drink. It was a transition. The hands warmed around the cup. The smell reached the face before the liquid reached the mouth. The body received the message slowly. The day is ending. Modern science has studied many herbs for their digestive, aromatic, and calming properties, though the evidence varies widely from plant to plant. Some herbs contain volatile oils and polyphenols that may influence digestion, relaxation, or the perception of comfort. But the ancient value of herbal drinks was not only chemical, it was rhythmic. You had to boil the water, you had to wait, you had to sip, you had to stop doing everything else. That may be the most forgotten ingredient of all. A warm herbal drink before sleep did not force the body to rest. It invited it. And in a world filled with artificial stimulation, perhaps invitation is exactly what the nervous system misses. The next food follows the same principle, but in a form far older than any bedtime routine. Number 6. Pomegranate seeds with yogurt. The bowl of red jewels. The pomegranate was one of the most symbolic fruits of the ancient Near East. Its shape suggested abundance. Its seeds suggested life. Its color suggested blood, beauty, and mystery. In the Hebrew Bible, pomegranates appear in sacred decoration, priestly garments, and temple imagery. They were not treated like ordinary fruit. They carried meaning. At the evening table, pomegranate seeds scattered over yogurt would have looked like red stones on white cloth. Beautiful. Tart. Alive. Modern science has studied pomegranates for their polyphenols, including compounds that gut bacteria can transform into metabolites, such as urolithins. Researchers are still learning why some people produce more of these compounds than others, and the gut microbiome appears to play an important role. That makes the pairing with yogurt especially interesting. Yogurt brings live cultures when traditionally fermented and not heavily processed. Pomegranate brings fibers and polyphenols that interact with the inner ecosystem. Ancient people did not need to know that. They knew the combination tasted complete. Tangy milk, sharp fruit, a little sweetness, a little bitterness, a bowl that woke the senses without overwhelming the night. This is how many ancient foods worked. They did not isolate one compound and turn it into a promise. They placed whole foods beside each other and let complexity do the quiet work. Number 5. Eggs with herbs. The small complete meal in a courtyard at dusk, a few eggs could become supper. Boiled in water, cracked by hand, sprinkled with salt, eaten with parsley, dill, mint, or olive oil. Simple enough for a child, strong enough for a worker. Eggs have always carried a certain symbolic power because they hold visible potential. Life inside a shell, food inside a fragile boundary. Nutritionally, eggs are unusually complete. They contain high-quality protein, choline, fat-soluble vitamins, and carotenoids, such as lutein and zeaxanthin. In modern nutrition, eggs have gone through waves of fear, rejection, and rehabilitation. Ancient people never had that debate. They saw eggs as what they were, concentrated nourishment. At night, eggs with herbs would not need to be a large meal. That is part of the point. A body preparing for sleep often does not need abundance. It needs enough. The herbs brighten the richness. The olive oil adds softness. The bread, if present, makes it a meal. This is ancient balance in miniature. Protein, fat, bitterness, salt, warmth, stillness. And sometimes the body thanks us most when we stop before excess. Number 4. Cabbage or wild greens with olive oil. The bitter lesson. The ancient world did not avoid bitterness. It respected it. Modern food culture often tries to remove bitterness from the diet. We sweeten, soften, dilute, and process until almost everything becomes easy. But ancient people ate wild greens, bitter herbs, cabbage-like vegetables, mustard leaves, and field plants that reminded the tongue of the land's difficulty. Bitter greens appear in the Passover tradition, carrying memory as much as flavor. They were not eaten only for pleasure, they were eaten to remember. And that may be one reason they remained important. Modern nutrition recognizes leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables as valuable sources of fiber, vitamins, minerals, and plant compounds that may support overall health as part of a balanced diet. But again, the ancient table understood this differently. Bitter food slowed the meal down. You could not devour it mindlessly. You had to taste it, you had to accept it, you had to let the body respond. A plate of greens with olive oil, salt, vinegar, and bread might look too plain to modern eyes, but it carried a wisdom we have nearly lost. Not every food is meant to entertain us. Some foods are meant to teach us how to pay attention. And when attention returns to the table, the body often follows. Number 3. Bread dipped in olive oil and vinegar. The Supper of the Field, Ruth's story, gives us one of the most tender food moments in the biblical world. She is a foreign widow. She has been gleaning in the fields. She is vulnerable, hungry, and unsure of her place. And Boaz invites her to eat bread dipped in vinegar. It is such a small detail, but it carries the entire emotional weight of hospitality. In the ancient field, vinegar was practical. It sharpened water. It flavored bread. It preserved. It refreshed. Olive oil brought density and satisfaction. Bread brought substance. Together, oil and vinegar turned plain grain into a meal. Modern Mediterranean eating still carries this pattern. Whole grains, olive oil, legumes, vegetables, herbs, vinegar, fish, nuts, and fruit. But the biblical scene adds something science cannot measure. Food is not only chemistry, it is welcome. When Ruth dipped bread in vinegar, she was not only receiving calories, she was receiving protection, recognition, and a place at the edge of someone else's table. This is why ancient food stories last, because they are rarely just about food. They are about the human need to be seen. And perhaps the healthiest meal in the world loses something when eaten in loneliness and hurry. Number 2. Stewed apples or quince with cinnamon-like spices, the sweetness after fire. Not every ancient sweetness came from honey. Some came from fruit softened by heat. Across ancient households, fruits like apples, quinces, pears, dates, and figs could be cooked slowly with water, wine, honey, or spices. The result was gentle, fragrant, and easy to eat after the main meal. Imagine a clay pot near the fading fire, fruit softening, steam carrying spice into the room, a spoon scraping the side of the bowl, children growing sleepy. Cooked fruit has a different feeling from raw fruit. It is softer, warmer, less demanding, almost like the day itself has been made edible. Modern nutrition might speak of fiber, polyphenols, and the way whole fruit differs from refined dessert. But the ancient home knew the emotional truth first. Sweetness at night should not always be loud. It can be slow. A small bowl of stewed fruit gave the household a way to end the meal without turning to excess. It satisfied the longing for sweetness while keeping the food close to its original form. That may be one of the great ancient lessons. The problem was never sweetness itself. The problem was sweetness cut loose from fiber, season, patience, and place. And now we come to number 1, the food that may best represent the whole ancient evening philosophy. Number 1, bread, olive oil, and a small cup of wine. The ancient table in its simplest form. At the center of the ancient table, again and again, we find the same 3 things: bread, oil, wine. Not always together, not always daily for everyone, not always in abundance, but symbolically, historically, and nutritionally, these 3 formed one of the great patterns of the Mediterranean and biblical world. Bread was the body of the meal. Olive oil was its richness. Wine, diluted and taken carefully in many ancient contexts, was part of hospitality, ritual, and the rhythm of the table. For modern viewers, this part needs care. Alcohol is not appropriate for everyone. Some people should avoid it completely, including people with certain medical conditions, people taking certain medications, people in recovery, pregnant people, and many others. This is not a recommendation to drink, but historically, the small cup at the ancient table represented something larger than alcohol. It represented closure. A day of work had ended. The bread had been broken. The oil had been poured. The conversation had slowed. The household had returned to itself. The deeper lesson is not that we must copy every ancient habit exactly. The lesson is that ancient meals had boundaries. They had beginnings and endings. They were eaten at tables, not dashboards. They were tied to firelight, conversation, gratitude, and the body's rhythm. Modern science can analyze the grain, the fat, the fermentation, the polyphenols, the fibers, and the microbes, but it cannot fully measure what happens when a meal becomes a ritual. And perhaps that is what the ancient world understood best. Rest does not begin when the eyes close. Rest begins when the body feels safe enough to stop. Before we end, there is one principle running through every food we explored tonight. The ancient evening table was not built around stimulation. It was built around settling. Warm grains, fermented milk, legumes, olive oil, figs, fish, herbs, greens, bread. Simple sweetness. Slow fire. These foods were not magic. They were not cures. They were not replacements for medicine, sleep, movement, or care. But they belonged to a way of life that treated food as part of a larger rhythm. The body worked. The body ate. The body rested. The body woke again. Ancient people did not know the names of every compound inside their meals. But they watched closely. They noticed which foods were too heavy. Which foods gave strength. Which foods comforted the stomach. Which foods carried well on a journey. Which foods helped a household feel whole after sunset? And maybe that is the real wisdom. Not that the past was perfect, but that the past was paying attention. So tonight, you do not need to change everything. Maybe just one thing. A warmer meal. A slower meal. A little less plastic. A little more olive oil. A few figs instead of a late-night sweet. A bowl of lentils instead of something eaten standing up. One small return to the table. If this kind of ancient science and quiet history speaks to you, you may want to subscribe for more slow, thoughtful journeys like this. And tell me in the comments, which ancient evening food surprised you most? Not all 15, just one. One small ancient habit brought gently into the modern night. That is where rest begins.